Growing up, I heard two very different statements about God. The first phrase was, God will never give you more than you can handle. And then the second was in my later teenage years, and it was a statement that contradicted the first that said, God will always give you more than you can handle. And for years, those statements felt very contradictory, and I wondered which one was true until I came to the conclusion, what if both of them are true? Hear me out. Picture yourself as an 8-ounce measuring cup. Okay, you pray for patience, you pray to become more, you pray for refinement and sanctification, whatever it is. And so then God, wanting to expand you, wanting to refine you, then gives you something that is of 16 ounces. So in your old identity, it's definitely more than you can handle. And you're gonna have to trust the becoming. But God will never give you more than you can handle, as in your true identity, as in that new identity that you're supposed to become, which is 16 ounces. But if you pour the 16 ounces into this 8-ounce glass, it will overflow. Not because 16 ounces is evil and not because God abandoned you, but because your current capacity cannot contain what is being poured. And so with that, what if life is not trying to destroy you, but rather expand you? And so maybe what feels overwhelming in this moment is not punishment, but rather an invitation to become somebody with larger capacity. So the question isn't, why is this happening to me? The question is, who am I becoming because of this? In the book of Joel, it writes, let the weak say that I am strong. Notice it doesn't say, let the strong say I am strong, but let the weak say I am strong. The declaration comes before the experience. And identity very much will always come before the embodiment. And growth almost always asks you to become someone before you feel like that person. And becoming is uncomfortable. I get it. Sometimes the circumstances that we are placed in just absolutely suck for the human experience. Betrayal sucks. Heartbreak sucks. The loss of a job sucks. Losing friendships suck. Nobody wakes up hoping their life genuinely falls apart. But what if the fire that was sent to consume you is the fire that was also meant to refine you? Gold doesn't become pure without the fire, and a pearl does not exist without irritation. A pearl is nothing more than a wound that healed beautifully. Think about this. A piece of sand, a parasite, something that doesn't belong, entered into that oyster, and the oyster can't get rid of it, so it begins to transform it. Layer by layer, it starts transforming this wound by coating NARS onto it until the very thing that once caused it pain becomes one of the most valuable parts of its story. And maybe healing and transformation works the same exact way. And perhaps the soul doesn't fully awaken without facing itself. But I feel like the irony is most of us spend our entire lives trying to escape the very process that forms us. We want the abs without going to the gym. We want the end of the marathon without having to run it. We want the wisdom without failure. We want the confidence without rejection, the healing without grief. We want the pearl, just not the wound that it takes to get that pearl. But did you know the odds of finding a pearl are approximately about 1 in 10,000? That is how rare and precious they are. And they're rare because the process is rare. Most oysters never even make a pearl in their lifetime. And likewise, not everybody chooses transformation. Not everybody chooses to do the inner shadow work. And many people spend their lives avoiding discomfort. They avoid the accountability. They avoid the grief. They avoid the heartache and the emotions that are trapped inside of them that they just continually press down. But what you do not feel, you do not heal. And we talked about that in last week. But those who stay with themselves, who sit with themselves through the discomfort, who allow life to polish them rather than harden them, they become something rare. And you see this symbolism showing up across the board in spiritual texts. You know, women are described as rubies. How precious is she? And a pearl. And then the archetype character Jesus in the Hebrew Bible that we very much do have, he understood the symbolism of pearls. In Matthew 13, he compares the kingdom of heaven of a pearl of great price, a treasure so valuable that the merchant sells everything he owns just to possess it. Why? Because some things are worth losing everything for. Sometimes it takes losing the very thing you thought you couldn't live without in order to show you that you very much can live without it, and in order also for you to become the person who very much does not need that and to lean on it and to lean on nothing but life itself. Maybe it took you losing a relationship so that way you would learn to stop abandoning yourself in hopes that that person wouldn't abandon you. Maybe it took you losing a job so that way you would learn to respect your time and believe in your dream and to pursue those gifts inside of you. Maybe you had to lose your health for a little bit to realize what was important for you, and that way you stop chasing money or external things and you actually start cultivating character and community and compassion and empathy for others. I once heard it said by Aaron McManus that maybe you once had to experience poverty so that way you could have empathy for the poor. And so sometimes the very thing that we thought would break us is also the very thing that is used to help refine us and to make us become somebody precious like a pearl, to refine that character process inside of us. And I truly do believe that there are some things worth losing everything for: wisdom, peace, truth, and ultimately your authentic self and that unconditional agape love. To lose the world in order that way you could gain your soul, have that purification process. And you see that also very much showing up with the character Job in the Hebrew Bible. He is one of the first characters very much entered in through suffering, and he loses everything that he propped his identity up on that he thought made him a good, righteous man. Because in the world and in the culture, when you were successful and succeeding, they thought you were favored by God. So to lose everything, now who are you? Who are you when you have nothing? When the very things that you thought you couldn't live without, you're living without them now. Who are you then? When all of the external ego and all of these masks that we tend to identify in that are just roles are stripped away, when you no longer have the relationship or the career or the opportunity or even your health or your good looks, who are you then? Are you kind? Are you loving? Are you caring? Are you compassionate? Do you react to life and complain and turn into a victim? Or do you say, you know what? No, I am going to become the rock on which the waters break, and life will not break me. And instead, you use this opportunity that life gave you, and you switch your perspective on it, and you say, you know what? Yeah, it sucks. I'm not going to avoid the discomfort of these feelings. I'm going to sit with them. I'm going to grieve them. I'm going to laugh. I'm going to cry. I'm going to let that rage boil up. But then I'm not going to sit in my anger. I'm going to use it and alchemize it to become the launching pad for my greatest future. Because I'm not looking back on where I've been. I'm going to look on where I want to go. And I'm going to completely surrender that process to life and let it guide me and lead me into that becoming process. And then later in the parables, you see the archetype character Jesus saying again, do not cast your pearls before swine. And I don't think that's simply about information. Growing up, I definitely kind of thought it was just about information, kind of growing up in church. I was like, oh yeah, those secular people, if they don't want to hear the Bible, don't waste your breath on it. But that's not what it's talking about. I think it's about honoring what cost you something. When you understand how much time it took you to get to where you are, when you understand the process in the story that got you to this point, the transformation, not everybody's going to fully know the story. Nobody will fully know the story. And when you realize how much that cost you, you're going to value your time a lot differently. And you don't hand your wisdom that your suffering produced to people who are bent on mocking it. Your healing is sacred. Your time is sacred. Your energy is sacred. And you learn to protect that. Because love is what? Love protects, and love has healthy boundaries. You know what it was like to be there, and so you protect the wisdom that it came with. Even let's say if you grew up in poverty and you had to go through that suffering to then gain the wisdom and understanding of how to manage money, you're going to probably protect your finances. You are going to protect your life in that budgeting, in that future from other people. You are not going to probably hang around people that are constantly having a broke mindset, that are constantly complaining about money. You are going to protect your mindset that was cultivated through that season of suffering, and you're not going to hang around those people because what? Bad company corrupts good character. And then in Revelation, it gives us one of the most fascinating images in all of Scripture. And I really love Revelation for its esoteric symbolism. And that is because New Jerusalem has 12 gates. Each gate is made from a single pearl. Imagine that. The entrance into heaven, each of the gates, is through something that was born from suffering, a pearl. Healing becomes the doorway, transformation becomes the entrance, and the wound becomes the gate. And you see the symbolism very much showing up across the board with the mystic path of the wounded healer. The serpent bearer that is lifted up, you see it with Asclepius, you see it with Jesus, you see it with Inanna and Ishtar in the Mesopotamia myths. She goes into the underworld. You have to go inward. It is the descent process to then ascend, the transformation, the death and rebirth process of the ego and of the soul. And Jesus also says in Luke 17:21, the kingdom of God is within you. And if that's true, then every single one of us eventually has to go inward. The one thing that most people want to avoid because they don't want to have to look at themselves. They don't want to have to look at themselves and see all the parts that they judge as good, bad, or ugly. Because we tend to categorize, these parts of me, those are good parts. These parts of me, however, those parts are kind of stupid. Those parts are bad. Those parts are ugly. I don't want to look at those parts of me. Those are my demons. I want to just keep those in a box. And we don't want to share love and compassion and forgiveness to those parts of ourselves and integrate the two. But we do. We have to go into the places we'd rather avoid. The fear, the shame, the anger, the grief, the child who still believes that they aren't enough. Because what we refuse to feel and what we refuse to face What we continually avoid cannot heal. And shadow work isn't about becoming darkness. It is about bringing light to the places that we've hidden from ourselves. And maybe that's what the pearl was trying to teach us all along, is that healing is not about pretending the pearl of the wound never happened. It is about refusing to let the wound have the final word, about refusing to let that thing that should have broke you be the thing that breaks you, but rather using it to be the thing that refines you in order to become. Because you are the one who gets to decide what gets to break you or make you in this lifetime. You are the one that defines the experiences and the circumstances that are outside of your control. And we're all given things at times, like I said, that absolutely suck. At times, it would be a lot nicer to get a helicopter ride to the top of the summit of the mountain, but that is part of the process, is the valley lows and the mountaintop highs. And even though you go through the valley in the shadow of death, you can fear no evil, because the Lord your God is with you, and he will never leave you nor forsake you. So even when you feel like you have lost everything, and the things that you thought you could once never live without are no longer in your possession, life is still with you, and it is still trying to refine you. And whether you use the analogy and the symbolism of like clay in the hands of a potter, or silver in the hands of a silversmith, or even a pearl, the process is still the same. You have to be refined. You have to become sanctified, and the soul becomes pure by removing all of the different things and all of this self-abandonment and shame and rejection and all of these things that keep us in lower stuck frequencies and that keep our energy not flowing properly in the body. Because healing is very much about refusing to let the wound have the final word. It is about taking the betrayal and growing it into wisdom. It is about taking that heartbreak and growing it into compassion, and about taking that loss and discovering its purpose. And you cannot skip the refinement. You can numb it, you can delay it, you can distract yourself, and you can spend your life searching for somebody else's light to illuminate your darkness and searching for their peace, since you refuse to cultivate your own. But eventually you have to create and cultivate and become your own pearl. That is your personal journey that nobody else can take for you. Again, I get it. Sometimes it would be a lot nicer to take a helicopter to the top of that mountain, but you still have to walk, because it is in the climbing that you become. It is the refining then of your character, of, you know what? I am stronger than this current circumstance. I am stronger than this current situation. I can ultimately do this because nothing is impossible with God. I can do all things through Christ, and Christ is your anointing in you, and that strengthens you. The knowing and seeing that vision, even though that vision might tarry, as Habakkuk says, do not delay. Continue pressing forward and continue having hope, assurance in the things not yet seen, because it will come in its timing of fruition. And it's also good to make a note that there is no problem taking a momentary break. I know for me, I go spontaneously hiking a lot with friends. And this past fall, we were hiking over in Banff and Jasper, and we decided to spontaneously hike some big ass mountains. And we were pretty exhausted from the summer season. And as we're hiking up these mountains, there were times that we're like, I'm sleep deprived and I need a breath. And we would just sit there. We'd catch our breath, we would refine, we'd reset, and then we would continue on. But we did not quit. We did not give in. We saw the fruition and we saw the succeeding of the summiting of that mountain. And you also have to see the process through with that pearl. I know it hurts, and at times that irritation is just going to hurt you. At times that heartbreak and that loss is just going to break you, and you're just going to sob in that grief, and that's okay. You shouldn't shame yourself for that, because what you don't feel, you don't heal. You have to go through the emotions, because it is the tears that purify our soul, but you still have to go through it. And when you avoid it, and when you distract yourself, and when you numb yourself from that pain and that process of becoming, you delay your own blessings. And on the other side of that pain and that breaking, and on the other side of those fears, are usually your greatest blessings, because that is the person you are supposed to become. You are supposed to go from this 8-ounce version and go into the 16-ounce version. But I feel like all too often we hold on to this 8-ounce version that ends up breaking, that vessel that gets cracked, because we're not supposed to stay that version. We're not supposed to stay in our old country. We're supposed to go on into the promised land. And the level of consciousness that got us to this point, it was beautiful, it was great, it was meant to be honored and respected, and then released, because it can't take us into the promised land. The version of you that is supposed to go on is 16 ounces. It is a bigger vessel. It is somebody who's been expanded because their character has been refined. They have been tested and tried. And like Paul says in the New Testament, they have ran the race. But we're supposed to run the race like an athlete, which means we have to strip down everything that is false from us. And you even see that story showing up with Anana as she goes into the underworld to rescue her sister. At each of the 7 gates, we have 7 energy fields, she releases a piece of her clothing. strips off something in the ego that is false, this refinement process, until just the pure nakedness of her is standing there. And that is the same for us, until the purity of our soul, of just, you know what? I am enough. I am seen. I am whole. And even if I am not delivered from this fire, I'm not going to back down. I will be the rock in which the waters break, because one day, the very thing you wished had never happened, the losing of your job, the loss and betrayal of that relationship, the restarting over of your life, whatever it is, whatever circumstance was given to you that just absolutely sucked, may become the very reason that somebody else believes it's possible, that healing is possible. And that's the beautiful mystery, because the wound was ultimately never the masterpiece. You were, and you are. But that wound also becomes one of the most valuable, precious pieces of your story. It becomes those pearls of wisdom that you learn to carry, and that you can enrich and teach into others, and that you can encourage other people with. That you can pour into them the courage and the love and the compassion, because you can relate. And as humans, we share connectedness through our stories, through our experiences of, hey, I get it. I know what it's like to be homeless. I know what it's like to grow up in a divorced home. I know what it's like to have somebody betray me in a relationship, but that doesn't mean you have to lose hope. And that pearl is very much proof that what once tried to break you could not stop you from becoming beautiful.